Hi, welcome to the Deep End. My name doesn't matter. Let's dive in. Romans chapter 1, verses 8 through 18. Notice he prays for them constantly because their faith has been proclaimed in all the world. So Paul is hearing about these Romans from all over. He prays specifically for them so that he would be able to come to them. There in verse 10, always in my prayers, asking that somehow, by God's will, I may at last succeed in coming to you. So even in Paul's prayers, what's remarkable about Paul is that even in his prayers, even in his request to the Lord, he is completely submissive to God's sovereign design and will. Then he explains why he wants to visit them, to impart a spiritual gift to them, to strengthen them. This is what Christian hospitality is, by the way. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ, a defining character trait is that you are hospitable and that you are encouraging other Christians. His desire for the hospitality, you see there in verse 13, I want you to know, brothers, that I have often intended to come to you, but have thus far been prevented. And bear in mind, Paul is not naive. He's been prevented by God's plan and by God's hand. And then he says this, in order that I may reap some harvest among you, as well as the rest of the Gentiles, I am under obligation both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to the wise and the foolish. So I am eager to preach the gospel to you also who are in Rome. So right here from the outset, Paul explains that he has an obligation to minister to people, to teach the gospel to people who don't know it, whether wise or foolish, whether Greek or civilized or uncivilized, the Greek or the barbarian. He desires to have a harvest. Now, let's look at the thesis statement here in verses 16 through 18. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. You want to know what the gospel is? That's what Romans is about. The gospel of Jesus Christ is the book of Romans. So it's lined out for you pretty simply. And right here in verse 16, we see he's not ashamed of the gospel. And then he explains what the gospel is. The power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. So it's the power of God to save for all who believe. So anyone who believes has the ability to be saved. And then there's this pattern by which God has worked. He's gone from the Jew to the Gentile. So the gospel of Jesus Christ comes through the Jewish people and down through the line, through the Old Testament, comes through to the New Testament and reaches to the Gentiles. Now, God's plan has from the beginning been to select a people for himself that he would raise up and then by that people save the nations. This is the promise given to Abraham in Genesis. By your seed, all the nations of the world will be blessed. The blessing of Abraham is a people who would be raised up, that the Messiah would come from, and then rescue the entire world. We have these next two statements that are juxtaposed with each other, verse 17 and 18. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. So we've got, for in it the righteousness of God, juxtaposed with the wrath of God being revealed. So the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith, or for those who believe. There's a desperation that we have in order to reconcile ourselves to God and be rescued from sin and death. We require the righteousness of God to allow us to enter into his presence, because our own righteousness won't do it. As Isaiah says, all our righteousness is as filthy rags before him, and yet he has made a way in Jesus Christ. If you trust in Jesus Christ, you will be made righteous. Contrast that with those who are regular men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth, who are unrighteous and ungodly. Wrath is revealed to them. You could sit on this passage forever. So I would admonish you today, take some time just to rest in what this says. The gospel is the power of God for salvation for everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. So God has had this pattern all through history, this plan all through creative redemption history, where he has created the world with this plan in mind of salvation and redemption and righteousness for your sake. This idea that the righteousness of God, that thing that we desperately needed, is revealed to you now in Jesus because you have faith in him. And then finally, remembering that the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. We want people to look at us as Christians and say, that man is righteous and he is living by faith, trusting in the righteousness of God, not in his own works of any kind. Thanks for joining me in Deep End. Go get to work.